see them coming, you know that they're from Wandsworth and that they are proper gentlemen and ladies of the borough, rather than, as my honourable friend so rightly reminds me, tatterdemalions. On Clause 9, this clause that is going to make life so unpleasant for people, we've put down the basic proposition, the simple proposition, the one that you find easiest and keenest to absorb, that we scrap the whole thing altogether. Bingo, bong, gone. Good night, Charlie, as they say if they're cricket commentators. I'm not a cricket commentator, so good night, Charlie is not usually one of my phrases, but I thought it was apposite on this occasion. So we put down some other amendments in case the proposers of this bill decided, for some eccentricity of their own, not to take out this particular clause. And the aim of this really is to ensure that what the clause does is rather watered down, that it is limited in its scope, that it ensures that there is a proper burden of proof on the authorities that they come round, that it really is a business trading activity, that it's not just somebody, you know, an individual, perhaps an old lady who needs to supplement her pension, who suddenly finds that she's not allowed to sell her car and is penalised for this, and therefore to clarify with some of the amendments 23, 24, 61 and so forth, which would try and help ameliorate the harshness of Clause 9 and to allow a little bit of free enterprise to be encouraged through the boroughs and indeed the cities of London. And I'm glad to say, Mr. Speaker, you now know the names of all the boroughs and cities of the noble and greater London area, so I don't think I need to repeat them again, though I may do later if I feel moved and it's relevant to the issue under discussion. And so I then want to look forward at some of the other amendments, because it's very disappointing. It is very disappointing that the City of Westminster, which has been for decades one of the best-run cities, not just in London, but in the world, and if they had cities on the moon, it would be one of the best-run in our particular part of the solar system. But as far as I know, they don't yet have cities on the moon, so I'll stick to the world for the City of Westminster. A fine, noble city run by great Conservative leaders who provided low council tax, low poll tax before that, low rates before that. They were absolutely, my honourable friend from a sedentary position says community charge, and I admire his pedantry, that I'm delighted that there are people in this House who are more pedantic than I am. It is an admirable trait, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and one that I fear is not encouraged often enough. Of course, wise, as anything the great lady says is wise. In ancient Rome, the Senate had a practice of deifying their great leaders, and if this were ancient Rome, I would propose that the great lady be deified, but as it isn't, I feel that I had better not. Particularly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when talking about Clause 10 of the London Local Authorities Bills, House of Lords, City of Westminster Act 1999, amendments there too, street trading in the City of Westminster. And I'm on the group now, for those of you who have been paying attention closely to what I'm saying, will know to amendment number 26. Mr. Deputy Speaker, some people may wonder why some of us speak for hours on these debates, but I have to say that is exactly why, because by banging on a little, you do get steady improvement and amelioration of the penalties on the British people. And what this is all about, as I tried to explain in my very opening remarks on this set of amendments, is about protecting the liberty of individuals from the constant encroachment of the state, bit by bit, day by day, not to meet some urgent or desperate cause, not because we're at war or we face terrorists, but because it is more administratively convenient. And one of the most important things that this Parliament can do is, by the proper scrutinising of legislation, ensure that the penalties on individuals are always minimised and that the greatest number of freedoms that can be preserved are preserved. A bad way of legislating and fundamentally against Conservative principles. And I'm glad to say we've got Lib Dems in the Chamber at the moment as well, because I don't think it's a very Lib Dem principle either, because one of the great virtues of the historic Liberal Party, one of the things that I've always thought made it so attractive, and why I actually quite like the coalition, is that they're genuinely liberal in parts, and they believe that people should be relatively free and only regulated where it's essential. It's okay, you're being competed with by somebody who isn't paying rates, Let's have lower rates, because otherwise you'll go out of business. Let's look at planning permission and whether that is a proper way of regulating business, or whether they have too great a burden and too many costs on them. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am at one, as so often with my honourable friend, in feeling that this is a good argument for deregulation and cutting taxes and getting things from a positive angle, rather than always looking at the negative and stopping people from doing things. Abilities that you could have a malevolent neighbour. Well, Mr. Speaker, you couldn't possibly have a malevolent neighbour being so good-natured yourself, but others may. And that malevolent neighbour may then take a little photograph of the car. Do you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you can take photographs with your telephone nowadays. And this is one of those great delights of modern technology that people do, and they take photographs of MPs going around their daily business and put them on websites. They haven't as yet said any MP is for sale, but they could take a photograph with their mobile telephone of your motor car and then put it on the internet and then say it's for sale and then ring up the council and say, look, what my neighbour's doing and how outrageous that is. And law courts over a perch of land, if that is still a unit that is allowed in these European days, and they argue through the courts for years and years and years, for decades and decades, and they cost themselves hundreds of thousands of pounds for a piece of land that was worth £20, £1,000 to start with. He's a genius par excellence. He is an exciting, charismatic figure who bestrides the nation as a colossus of political affairs. There is a but coming, as you probably realised, and it doesn't relate to the former honourable member for Henley, Mr. Boris Johnson. It relates to who may come after him, that sadly, though he ought to be, and I go back to what I was saying about Lady Thatcher, if it were possible to deify people, Mr. Boris Johnson would be next on the list after the great lady. But he will not live forever. He will not be mayor forever. Indeed, some people are heard to gossip and to speculate that the Mayor for London has higher ambitions and looks to come back into alternative places to carry out his duties, and therefore the Mayor of London is not, sadly, the individual who currently holds the office, but it is the office itself. So I'm not entirely supportive of my honourable friend for Shipley's amendment number 67. I feel that we would be taking a risk, a gamble. We would, to use that term that is rarely heard, be playing with fire. We would be risking our happiness of our prospective fellow countrymen, or our constituents, if we represent London constituents, by putting in somebody who might be a left-wing firebrand who became the Mayor for London, some dangerous socialist figure who all he wanted to do was penalise motor car owners. We might, heaven help us, end up with a green Mayor of London, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The mind boggles at the thought of what we would do with a green Mayor of London. A red one is quite bad enough. And therefore I think it's safer to leave it with the Secretary of State, according to my own amendment.